guys, welcome back. If you're new, my name's Ariella and I make videos about medical school and my journey through medicine. A few vlogs back, I actually mentioned that I was working on my yearly budget for the loans that I take out for medical school. Some people in the comments expressed interest in knowing how I budget for medical school, and it's been a little while since that video went up. I just haven't had a chance to make it, but I finally sat down and made a baseline Excel sheet for you guys to use and to reference and to kind of show you what my process is when I'm making my budget. A couple things before we start. So I'm gonna approach this as someone who's kind of in the middle ground of what they want from their loans. So there are definitely multiple different types of people. Some people think that you most benefit from taking out the least amount of money as possible, living in a really cheap apartment, being extremely frugal. And then there are other people who can afford certain luxuries and think that it's more important to have those during school. For me, I'm kind of in the middle. I don't think I necessarily want to live as cheaply as possible, but I, at the same time, don't want to be spending tons of money unnecessarily. Additionally, I'm approaching this as a student who has no outside help from their parents or from work experience before medical school, so everything that I buy for medical school comes out of loans for me. And so I tried to make what I think a typical worksheet might look like, and although it is not identical to my own personal expenses, it is very similar in a lot of the categories. And no, unfortunately, there is not a Lululemon budget. Went back and forth on whether or not that was considered a necessity in medical school. I've ultimately decided it's not. The spreadsheet will be linked down below so that you can see it as well, and I've left comments on the side so that way you don't have to parse through every single piece of this video in order to remember what my comments were. So that'll be available in a Google Drive link in the description down below, and you can download it and either use it to reference for your own spreadsheet or just have it as a secondary reference. Whatever you want to do with it, it's there and it's pretty organized. Another thing is that I do not recommend working during medical school in order to offset the cost of some of those loans or living expenses or tuition or whatever it may be, unless it's minimal hours to gain clinical experience or volunteer experience. I probably would not recommend working a part or full-time job. Medical school is a job in and of itself, and adding more work on top of that means you're going to be more stressed when it comes to actually getting your schoolwork done. You're going to have a lot less time to do that, and that's less time that you can focus on doing well and performing well in medical school. And there will also be lots of opportunities to volunteer with different clubs on campus, so if that's something that's really important to you and that you're interested in, know that it's an opportunity that's available to you in medical school. You don't have to go out and seek different opportunities outside of the school. Lastly, I recommend reading a book called The White Coat Investor before you go to medical school. It's a book that's kind of geared toward residents and how residents can save the most money, but it does have a little bit of information about med students, and I think it's important to be as financially literate as possible when you're taking out these large loan sums. He's extremely knowledgeable when it comes to handling money in medical school and in residency and onward, and that information is really useful so you can get a good look at what's to come when you finish medical school. As you'll kind of find out at the end of this video, my approach is definitely different than that author's, but it is still a really informative read. The last thing that I want to touch on in terms of the budgeting is that you don't need to fear loans, you just need to be aware of them. You need to have an idea of how much money you're going to have to take out in order to get through this medical journey. It's a lot and it can be really scary, but there are definitely ways to manage your money well once you get into residency. At the end of the day, once you're a physician, the large sum in loans is going to be a little bit easier to pay back than you might expect. It is still fairly significant, but because we take out so much money for our education, the system is designed to make it not completely impossible for us to recover. One more thing before we get to the spreadsheet is that either very soon after the time that I post this video or before I post this video, I will be hitting 1,000 subscribers, which is actually insane. I'm blown away every time there's a milestone in the number of subscribers and how much engagement you guys have with me. We have such wonderful, compelling conversations, and you guys are all so nice in the comments. So I wanted to try and give back to you guys, and I don't have a lot, hence the medical school budgeting video, but I thought it would be really nice if I did a giveaway of first aid for the USMLE Step 1. It's a fantastic resource for first and second year students, so I wanted to do a giveaway of this resource for 1,000 subscribers. So thank you guys so much. All you have to do is be subscribed to me on YouTube and leave a comment in the description of this video, either commenting thoughts on my budget or your favorite type of video that I make. Leave your Instagram handle in the comments as well, and I will pick a random winner after 2 weeks, and I will DM you on Instagram and get your information so that I can send you your copy of first aid. I hope this is exciting for you guys. Seeing my channel grow is incredibly exciting for me, so yeah. Okay, without further ado, let's get into the actual budgeting portion of this video. All right guys, so I'm here, it's the next day, hence the outfit change and the lack of makeup, but I'm still here. I'm still gonna give you my budget and the spreadsheet that I've created. So like I said, this is all going to be linked in the description below. Let's just get into it. So as you can see on screen, I've created several different columns. I have the different categories of expenses that we're going to be going through, and then I have a category for monthly expense if it's something that's recurring, yearly expense to find out the total, and then I have my comments over here on the side if you need to reference back to these. So in red, we've got our school fees, anything relating to things that you're gonna have to buy for school, so that's in red. And then I have apartment related expenses in yellow, and then the total amounts and like how much you're gonna need from each loan in green. So let's start off with our school expenses. So the first and by far the largest school expense that you're going to have is tuition. So tuition is going to be a yearly expense, and I just calculated this one based on the average of all 5 Philadelphia medical schools in their out-of-state tuition. This is going to be variable depending on whether or not you do get in-state tuition. If you do, that's fantastic. It's going to significantly decrease the amount of loans that you have and thus decrease the amount of interest that you accrue on this very large sum of loans. I think the average around the United States for medical schools in general is in the $50,000 range, but as the years go on, that's definitely going to keep increasing. And also keep in mind that things in Philadelphia are going to cost quite a bit more than they would in a more rural area. So some of these expenses and some of these tuition calculations are going to be higher because I used Philadelphia as an example, but if you're in a more rural area, this will probably be a little bit outside of the price range that you're looking at. That's tuition, that's going to be the bulk of your expenses. So next up is the school fee. This is just going to be a yearly fee that your school is going to take from you. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea what goes into this. I'm assuming it's some sort of like activities fee. I'm not sure, but I just picked $700 as a number because it's around the price that it would cost. Next up is going to be your books and supplies. So I budgeted out quite a bit more for this category than what you might expect based on looking at some other schools' websites. I highly recommend overestimating this category because schools don't usually include things like Sketchy, UWorld, Boards and Beyond, etc., those different types of online boards resources as part of your books and supplies. And those things can be quite expensive. So $870 is the number I chose because UWorld 360 is $500 and Sketchy is $370. So I think what you should do is you should decide what resources you would like to have within like the first 2 to 3 weeks of the semester, keeping in mind that upperclassmen will probably give you free access to some of these materials. However, this free access is going to be relatively limited. It's not going to be as interactive as it might be if you bought the actual full service. So keep that in mind. I also overestimated this a little bit because I distinctly remember something weird happening in the beginning of last year that I was kind of upset about, and it was the fact that some of the supplies that we needed to buy are sold in a bundle by one of our student organizations. However, the bundle that was being sold by the student organization was more expensive than the amount that the school had budgeted out or recommended that you budget out for your instruments. So I thought that was very strange. So that's another reason why I kind of beefed this category up a little bit. In terms of textbooks, I always download PDFs of textbooks, or I use online copies of textbooks via our library website. I think it's a pretty common thing for medical schools. They always have access to your text materials through the library or through some online resources. So for me, no money is spent on physical textbooks. That's not something that's important for me at all. Also, if you're planning on getting a new tablet or computer for school, I would include that price here. And I recommend looking at refurbished models in order to save a little bit of money. If you are going through the maker of the product that you want to get, it's usually pretty reliable. They'll send you a good product and it'll be at a fairly discounted price. Next up is the instruments category, and this I budgeted out $300 for. Again, I budgeted this a little bit higher than expected because of the situation with the student organization being more expensive than what the school told me to budget for. Additionally, second years will most likely not need to include instruments as a part of their budget because you're going to have already purchased them for first year and you don't need anything new for second year, or at least that's what the upperclassmen told me. So at my school, we don't need anything new for the second year, hence why the instruments category is not relevant for our second year. Next up is going to be board exams. This is not relevant for your first year, but if you are a second year medical student, don't forget this. It's a very hefty sum. So if you're an MD student and you're looking to take USMLE Step 1, that's going to be around $600. If you're a DO student and you're looking to take both USMLE Step 1 and COMLEX Level 1, you're looking at a total sum of about $1,300. So it is very expensive to take these board exams. Do not forget to budget them in because that will be an unfortunate surprise later on. All right, so next up are the federal loan fees. So I'll get back to how I calculated this shortly once we've gone through our entire cost of living and all the money that we need. This applies for subsidized and unsubsidized loans. Your school page is most likely going to warn you about this. It's going to be 1.059% times the total loan amount. So I will show you how I got this number, 838, later. But I would expect, depending on how much you're taking out in loans for this amount, to be anywhere between $750 to maybe up to $1,000. Lastly, in terms of our school expenses, if you need to park on campus, don't forget to budget that out. So I just added $300 in the yearly budget for parking on campus. This might be free for you, or it might be more expensive if your campus has a garage that's really expensive because you're downtown in the middle of the city. That rounds off our school expenses. So next up is the expenses for our general living and apartment. So the second largest expense that you will most likely need to take out is rent. So for my hypothetical situation here, I've listed rent as $1,000 per month, and that comes out to $12,000 per year. So if you guys are unfamiliar, you can use Google Sheets to kind of do these rudimentary calculations for you. If I just delete this entire thing right here, and I want to find out how much it's going to be for rent every year, I will just type equals in this cell, and then I will click on B11, which is the monthly rent that I've listed, and then I will type asterisk 12 to multiply it by 12, hit enter, and then you've got your yearly amount. So if for some reason this increased to $1,200 per month, this will automatically adjust itself. Let's put this back to 1,000. All right, so in terms of rent, $1,000 is, I would say, a middle ground price for Philly. You can easily pay less, but you can also very easily pay more, depending on if you want to live with roommates, how nice your apartment is, the proximity to the school, if you're in the city versus the suburbs, etc. If you noticed, I multiplied my monthly rent by 12 in the yearly category because I wanted to make sure that my loans covered the summer months expenses as well. Don't forget about those 3 months if you are not living at home over the summer, but if you're living at home or you're living somewhere rent-free, you can go ahead and multiply rent by 9, assuming that you have a 9-month lease, which is, I would say, pretty unusual. Usually a 12-month lease is more typical. Additionally, you're going to get your deposit that you submitted to the school back in your first loan. loan amount. So the way that my school works, and I'm not 100% sure if this is how it works at every single medical school, but this is just how it works for us, is that we take out all of these loans in order to cover these expenses. That gets broken up into 3 because we're on trimester schedules. So in the first trimester, they will take out that 1/3 of our total loan amount. They will subtract 1/3 of tuition from that, and then they will dispense us the rest of that 1/3. So we get paid in thirds, basically. During the first loan disbursement, we will get our deposit back that we placed when we accepted going to our medical school. So that amount may cover an entire month of rent if you want to budget that in as well. Otherwise, you're just going to have that extra money for something else. Last note, be prepared to pay up to first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit before you get your loans. So usually it takes between like 2 and 3 weeks to get your actual loan disbursement. So if you sign a lease to start before that loan money gets dispersed, they're going to be expecting you to pay maybe up to first month's rent, last month's rent, and security deposit. So based on our calculation, if security deposit is the same as first month's rent, that's $3,000 up front. That's going to be before your loans get dispersed, which is kind of rough. So make sure that you either work over the summer to make that money, or you have that money saved up from previous experience, or you have someone who can spot you. Worst case scenario, you might need to take out a private loan over the summer before you start medical school. It's just something to keep in mind, something to be aware of. Next up is utilities. So for this, I've written down $80 a month, comes out to $960 per year. Again, I tried to pick a middle ground. My utilities first year were pretty outrageously expensive. Keep in mind, if you're living alone, internet's gonna be a huge fraction of your utilities payment. If you want great internet, it's gonna cost you $50 per month. Having roommates definitely helps subtract that cost significantly, but it's still going to be expensive. Apartment complexes tend to have less expensive heat and those sorts of utilities than townhouse style apartments do, so that's something to keep in mind. But then they also have more expensive rent. You have to decide what you prefer and what is going to work out better for you. But again, just adjust this category based on what your utilities are. And if you know somebody who lived in the apartment previously that you're interested in, reach out to them and ask them what the utilities were on average throughout the year. They might be able to tell you, oh, the utilities were great in the summer, but once the winter came around and you needed to heat the apartment, they got really, really expensive. Or they might tell you that utilities were relatively low the entire year. It's good to have an idea of what to expect before you sign the lease. Okay, so next up is going to be the gas/car/travel category, and I budgeted out a very small amount for this, just $15 a month or $180 a year, because I mostly walked to school and I lived very close to school last year, so gas was not really a very expensive part for me. So accommodate this accordingly if you're commuting. However, I think at least if you're watching this as it's being posted or in the current time, many schools are switching to a highly virtual model, so I don't think there's going to be a ton of commuting and in-person learning in terms of like physical lectures. I think a lot of that's going to be online, so that might be a reason why the travel/gas/car budget would be lower. Next up is food. So for this, I budgeted out $250 a month or $3,000 a year. This might be a bit high for people. I like to cook and try new foods and buy expensive ingredients and treat myself. So realistically, I could survive on $200 a month or less, but it makes me happy to be able to cook and just get myself nice things. So again, adjust accordingly. If you're not really a food person, and you could probably decrease this budget a pretty significant amount. I also like to give myself a little bit of leeway on the food budget because I know that I like to eat out with my friends, like maybe once a week, and so that's gonna be 4 times a month. And if you're in Philadelphia, a meal out can easily cost you like $10 or more, so that's already $40 of the food budget gone, so that realistically leaves me with about $200 for groceries. Next up is the personal budget. So I budgeted out $150 per month or $1,800 per year. And this can really be for anything. It can be for class dues or club dues, things that you need to play in medical school. in order to be a member of a club, or like something like our class dues give us access to the scribe notes and also access to the Patagonia sales with a discount, as well as going towards our Day of Remembrance ceremony, things like that. You also might need extra clothes or electronics or money for going out at night. Medical students do actually take some time off, and sometimes we go out at night. That can be expensive. So yeah, this is just basically anything that you want. Adjust accordingly if you find that you're not spending that much money on personal things. Next up is a parking at your apartment category. So this might be totally free for you, or it might be more expensive. Again, I feel like a broken record. I picked a random number of $65 a month, and that comes out to $780 a year. Depending on where you are, this could be very different. So if there is paid parking at your apartment, make sure that you include it in your recurring expenses. Last up, I have a category for furnishing your apartment. So this wasn't relevant for me first year because I had a roommate who had already furnished the apartment that I moved into. But if you're completely brand new furnishing an apartment, I think $1,500 is a reasonable budget in order to do so. If you're going to be furnishing your apartment, I would highly recommend checking out your class Facebook page. So usually if you are coming into medical school, someone's going to make a Facebook page called X University Class of 2024, and a lot of the upperclassmen will go onto those pages and sell their used furniture and their used equipment, so things like the ophthalmoscope, the otoscope, those types of things, because you don't actually need those when you're going into residency. So a lot of those students are going to residency, they want to get rid of all these things before they move, and so they will sell furniture at a very discounted price. So I highly recommend you check out that if it's available to you. We are at our total amount. So this category right here, I calculated by using the sum function in Google Sheets. You just click sum and then add a parenthesis, and then you click on all the different categories you would like to include in that sum. So that includes all my yearly expenses. That will give you the total amount of $79,134. So we are going to backtrack a little bit to our loan fees here. Remember when I said that the loan fees are going to be 1.059% times the total loan amount. So now I know my total loan amount is $79,134. So in this section right here, I wrote equals and then D19, which is our total amount cell, times 0.01059, which is equal to 1.059%. And that's how I got this number. So with our loan fees, which is the total amount cell plus the federal loan fee cell, we are at $79,972. This is the amount of money that you're going to need to borrow or have in the bank in order to pay for your first year of medical school, hypothetically, in this scenario that I've created. So what's going to happen is your school is going to list a cost of attendance on their website. I picked an example cost of attendance of $80,744. This is honestly probably a little bit high. It usually ends up being less expensive than this, but to get this number, I just added $24,000 to the tuition, which is close to what a lot of the schools amount to, but it may change depending on the area that you live in, because cities tend to be more expensive in all of these budgeted categories. So in terms of the unsubsidized Stafford loan, that's always going to be $40,500. So the unsubsidized Stafford loan gives up to this amount every year to the medical graduate students. Beyond this amount, you're going to be required to either get outside help, a Grad Plus loan, or a private loan. So I'm going to continue with this as the Grad Plus. So in terms of the Grad Plus amount needed, what I did is I took the total loan amount, which is $79,134, and I subtracted $40,500 from that to get $39,472. So this is the amount that I'm going to enter when I fill out the Grad Plus loan application. You're going to need to fill out an application for both of these loans, as well as a master promissory note, and I highly recommend checking out your school's website because usually they have very detailed instructions on how to go through applying to get all of this money, but that is the total amount for all of the loans that I would need to take out for this hypothetical first year of medical school. So a couple things before we end. Remember that you can only take out government loans up to the cost of attendance indicated by your school. So things like room and board, supplies, etc. are going to have a predetermined amount listed on your school's website and will all go into their estimated cost of attendance. If your budgeted cost is greater than their estimated cost, whether it's due to a high rent, or you need to take more boards than what they recommend, or that's for DO students specifically, or you need boards resources, things like that, you can either choose to take out private loans, or you can meet with financial aid with your budget sheet and discuss increasing your personal cost of attendance so that you can take out further loans. I personally recommend the latter because it keeps your loans all in one place. And also, I'm not 100% sure on this one. I believe that some private loans can be compound interest rather than simple interest. Basically, what that means is if you have simple interest, the interest is going to increase based on the original loan amount that you took out. If you have compound interest, the interest is going to increase based on the loan amount plus the amount of interest it's accrued up to that point. So compound interest is obviously going to grow a lot faster because if your total sum grows, then your interest grows. If that's a little bit confusing, don't worry about it. There are tons of financial aid resources at every medical school. I can guarantee that. I would highly recommend seeing them if you're confused about any of this. And there's also plenty of resources online, like that White Coat Investor book that I recommended and YouTube videos. Watch as much as you possibly can because I think it's really important to know a lot of this stuff before you get into it. So, my personal take here, and you might disagree. Different strokes for different folks, right? If you feel like you have extra money after you've taken out this large loan sum, you can always turn around and pay back that loan later. Personally, I would rather have extra money on hand for things like sketchy, supplies like the otoscope, ophthalmoscope that weren't listed. And for me personally, being comfortable means that I am way less stressed about my living situation and can be more focused on school. So this means a nice apartment with plenty of workspace, a larger food budget for, like I said, takeout if I want it, things I can do to treat myself because medical school is really hard. Again, you can always pay those loans back at any time if you decide that you don't need the excess. So it's really going to be up to you what you decide to do in the end. If you want to live in a really cheap apartment and live as frugally as possible so that you decrease the amount of loans that you have as much as possible, more power to you. That's what the White Coat Investor recommends because watching these very large loans grow with basically little means to pay them back until maybe 5 or 6 years after you've graduated medical school, depending on what specialty you go into, is pretty daunting. And interest is just money that's getting thrown away, right? You're not getting anything from it. You're not getting any education from it. You're just paying for it. So that is one way to approach it, and I think that's a very respectable way to approach it. But for me personally, I can't live in a dirt cheap apartment in like a tiny little shoebox without ways to enjoy myself during school because that's going to make me more stressed overall and it's going to ultimately lead me to perform maybe slightly worse than I otherwise would have. And for me, my performance in school is extremely important. It's probably the most important thing to me because I want to be able to score very highly on boards and I want to be able to open myself up to all the different opportunities that I have and learn as much as I possibly can. So for me personally, I try to live relatively frugally without spending too much money on unnecessary things, but I do afford myself small luxuries. If I have any leftover money at the end, I use that to just immediately pay back the excess loan that I have. That's how I have approached it, and I feel like it's worked out pretty well. Obviously, your situation might be different than mine, and if it is and you are confused, definitely feel free to reach out over Instagram. I'm not the best at this kind of stuff, but I do have a little bit of knowledge, and I would be happy to help and kind of talk you through or point you to different resources. If you guys like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. It would mean so much to me. And like I said before, please enter the giveaway. I want to definitely give back to you guys as much as possible. So I hope that that's something that you guys want. And yeah, this spreadsheet will be linked down below and that's everything. So I will see you guys in the next video. Bye. you.